White people versus the wilderness, the continent that tried to kill us. All things stand for them to look upon with a weather-beaten face, and the whole country, being full of woods and thickets, represented a wild and salvage hue. What is the true beginning of the American frontier spirit of white people? It starts with a type of human being who looked at famine in Europe, lives with no opportunity to progress, and rigid hierarchies that decided your whole life before you drew breath. And instead of shrugging, they said, "Hold my beer. I'll take my chances with a 2-month boat ride that smelled like vomit, rats, and broken dreams. The most hardcore job application in human history. It was destiny, white people carrying their blood, their blueprint." Robert Plomin describes this when he writes, "Genetics is the major reason why people differ in personality, mental health and illness, and learning and cognitive abilities. The most important thing that parents give to their children is their genes." These white people advanced into the frontier by choice, driven by an instinct older than nations. And when the English, Scots, Irish and German, the ones who looked at a creaking wooden ship, 2 months of scurvy and storms, and thought, "Seems legit. Badass." When these settlers finally crossed the Atlantic, they would step into a land that looks like Britain, but on hard mode. A continent so vast that, in the words of Krevker, who can tell how far it extends? Who can tell the millions of men whom it will feed and contain? The New World rolled its eyes, spat in their face and said, "Oh, you thought Europe was rough. Good luck." An 18th century ship's log recording the fleet off Boston describes, "The New World greeted them with harsh weather, danger and uncertainty from the first moment. 22nd of the month, cloudy weather. We landed our men and drew them up in a battalion and exercised until about 2 in the afternoon. A hard shower of rain and wind came about 8 at night, and then Captain Rousey's boat came on board in distress. 10 sail came down today, 23rd, hard westerly wind. Several vessels drove. 8 sails came down today, 24th, 7 sail came down. About noon we came to sail and stood over to Deer Island and came to anchor near the General. About 3 in the afternoon the fleet came to sail. 52 sail in total. And when they finally went ashore, Bradford's diary reads like a 1-star TripAdvisor. The shock was immediate. Bradford wrote that they had now no friends to welcome them, nor inns to entertain and refresh them, no houses, much less towns, to repair unto, to seek for succour. All around them lay a desolate landscape. For summer being done, all things stand for them to look upon with a weather-beaten face. The forests ahead were full of woods and thickets, and, as he put it, represented a wild and salvage hue. Look behind you. A mighty ocean. A 3,000-mile moat that shouted, "Abandon hope, all ye who don't have a return ticket." If they looked behind them, there was the mighty ocean which they had passed and was now as a main bar and gulf to separate them from all the civil parts of the world. And even in those first days, they found and saw by experience the hardness of the place and country to be such, as few in comparison would come to them, and fewer that would bide it out. Before the first cabins were finished, the arrows showed up like the world's worst housewarming gift. All of a sudden, Bradford wrote, a great and strange cry, "Indians! Indians!" and their arrows came flying amongst us. 0 to ambush in 2.5 seconds, no warning, and no diplomatic small talk. In another settlement, men were struck down with such speed that few even saw the weapon that killed them. These were brutal ambushes, bodies dragged off, defaced, torn into many pieces, carried away in derision. As another record states, they have killed 30 men in total, and those who were taken alive were brutally tortured in the most barbaric way, mocking and taunting the prisoners in blasphemous fashion as the men lay dying in agony. One account describes a man who was shot by 3 of them at the same moment, each shot giving him a mortal wound. Then, in their barbarous fashion, they cut off his head and carried it away, though it was later recovered, leaving the rest of his body behind as a grim monument to their inhuman cruelty. They stepped off the boat into a continent that immediately tried to kill them with weather, starvation, and express delivery violence, and these absolute mad lads looked at all of it, spat out a mouthful of salt water, and said, "Right, let's build a country." White Boy Summer started in 1620. They just forgot to tell the Indians, the wolves, the malaria, and the Atlantic Ocean that the vibe check was non-negotiable, and still they pushed forward. Entire colonies like Jamestown, Plymouth, and Popham got speed run straight to the brink of extinction. During the starving time in Virginia, only 60 people remained alive. They boiled roots, acorns, even the skins of their dead horses. Some dug up the body of a native who had been slain previously and used what they could for food. Another gentleman decided marriage was overrated, killed his wife, salted her like Christmas ham, and was halfway through dinner before the neighbours finally said, "Mate, this is why we can't have nice things." He got executed naturally. Cannibalism, the original keto diet, 0 stars, do not recommend, and still they refuse to die. Because being alive and never giving up is apparently a core white people trait. The living can keep a cow, cut a path, build a fire, rebuild a world. The dead just get eaten by worms. Hard pass. The land acted as a sieve, filtering out the weak. Only the valiant and generous spirits survived. Cowardice, jealousy, idleness, these traits withered quickly. Those who survived the crossing and the first winters bore their difficulties cheerfully, with a resolve that puzzled their own chroniclers. They saw that, although the people generally bore all their difficulties very cheerfully, and with a resolute courage, being in the best of their strength, these people were starving, freezing and bleeding from places you don't mention in polite company, yet still woke up humming absolutely legendary. And it worked. The colonists found a land magnificent with forest trees, but they had no sawmills. He had one noble friend, a firm log cabin, rock to stand upon, his broad axe and his own strong and willing arms, built cabins from logs halved together at the corners, sealing the gaps with clay. Round logs were halved together at the corners. The cracks between the logs were chinked with wedges of wood and daubed with clay, waking some nights to find wolves pushing their noses through the cracks. Many cabins had at first no chinking or daubing. One settler, while sleeping, was scratched on the head by the sharp teeth of a hungry wolf who thrust his nose into the space between the logs of the cabin. And through these difficulties, a new type of European emerged, the one Crèvecoeur later described as a new man who acts upon new principles. The American is a new man who acts upon new principles. He must therefore entertain new ideas and form new opinions. English, Scots, Irish, Germans, Swedes, all fused into a single continental temperament. What then is the American, this new man? He is either an European or the descendant of an European. Hence that strange mixture of blood which you will find in no other country. He becomes an American by being received in the broad lap of our great alma mater. Here individuals of all nations are melted into a new race of men whose labours and posterity will one day cause great changes in the world. Americans are the Western pilgrims who are carrying along with them that great mass of arts, sciences, vigour and industry which began long since in the East. They will finish the great circle. A man who might have arrived as a servant or a starving peasant could, within a generation, be a freeholder, rising from nothing into being, master of 200 acres. The outcasts of Europe became the backbone of a civilization, farmers, riflemen and homesteaders who live by the old truth that a small hut of one's own is better than a grand house ruled by another. But with the freedom came blood. The Pequot War, the first major colonial native conflict in New England, erupted in the 1630s and ended with the near destruction of the Pequot Nation at the Mystic Massacre. 700 Pequots barbecued in their own fort. The rest hunted down like it was open season with no bag limit. The Narragansetts, called by some colonists the most warlike and fierce of the southern tribes, tried the whole Switzerland neutrality thing. It didn't work. The Narragansetts sheltered Wampanoag fugitives and refused to hand them over, and the colonists feared that such a powerful nation would soon join Philip's uprising. The result was a preemptive strike, the Great Swamp Fight, where the Narragansett fort was stormed and burned in deep winter. Only after the colonists burned their villages did the Narragansetts finally go, "Oh, it's like that," and join King Philip's war, and from that moment their nation was driven toward destruction. Their wigwams fired, their warriors cut down without mercy. King Philip's War was one long story of burning and massacre. The great Narragansett stronghold stormed in Winter Swamp, and after that, very few were left standing. The New World was a collision of civilizations where pity evaporated almost instantly. New England's travels through the bloody sea. Welcome to the civilization's melting pot. Temperature set to inferno. It never works. It never works. We have no princes for whom we toil, starve, and bleed. We are the most perfect society now existing in the world. Here, man is free as he ought to be. The chains of Europe fell away. Everything has tended to regenerate them. New laws, a new mode of living, a new social system. Here they are become men. In Europe they were as so many useless plants, wanting vegetative mould and refreshing showers. They withered and were mowed down by want, hunger, and war. But now, by the power of transplantation, like all other plants, they have taken root and flourished. Europe was the sad windowsill with no sunlight. America was the industrial grow light cranked to 11. Fire is needed by the newcomer whose knees are frozen numb, and the psychological blueprint of the white people who crossed oceans because they sensed something was waiting for them. The Wild West, where law ends and men begin. Before you ever get a sheriff or a ranger, you get a boomtown. Gold hits, wagons roll in, and suddenly there's too much money, too much boredom, and no real law, real frontier beginnings, raw, unfiltered, real life. One chronicler of Montana says there was no law except that of the miners' meeting, a kind of improvised democracy that was vague, unsatisfactory, fickle, and totally outmatched once professional criminals arrived. A system held together with grit and massive balls, which, frankly, is still better than some governments today. The environment is designed for violence. Streets are lined with saloons pouring out poisonous liquors under names that sound like jokes. Tangle leg, 40 rod, lightning, tarantula juice. Tarantula juice, seriously, absolute madness. Thomas J. Dimsdale, the author of Vigilantes of Montana, wrote that this stuff was strong enough to drive excitable men to madness and to the commission of homicide on the slightest provocation. Frontier grade fuel, if anyone has the recipe, add it in the comments below. Gambling houses with open doors, loud music and mixed crowds of all tribes and tongues become little pressure cookers. Arguments are settled not in court but by an appeal to brute force, the stab of a knife, or the discharge of a revolver. The social order follows the environment. Calling a man a liar, a thief, or a son of a bitch is provocation sufficient to justify instant slaying. White men in the mid-1800s, men of grit, steel, and zero hesitation. Yeah, your ancestors. By the time Boomtown is in full swing, you have what the same drifter calls universal license a spell where everyone knows the town is wide open, and every vice is available for cash, the kind of open you hear before a gun clicks. Women of easy virtue, aka whores, parade in expensive clothes, miners blow their dust in a night, and into this stew drift-hardened road agents and killers diseased with crime, for whom, as the drifter grimly puts it, the only available prescription was a stout cord and a good drop. A century later, and you can see what happens when that thin line pushes into cattle country without enough law to match the temptations. It's where order steps back and real life steps in. Ogallala sits in the South Platte Valley as the Gomorrah of the cattle trail. From amongst its 500 buildings, no church spire pointed upward, but instead 3/4 of its business houses were dance halls, gambling houses, and saloons. So basically, Vegas, if Vegas had rabies and carried a Winchester. Inside those rooms, morality is openly suspended. One hard-bitten foreman says it straight: "I don't want to ruin an innocent man, and a trail outfit is not supposed to have any morals. Just so the herd don't count out shy on the day of delivery, I don't mind how many drinks the outfit takes." The frontier at its most untamed. As long as the cattle arrive and the money changes hands, what happens in the saloons is outside the concern of respectable society. Law is an afterthought. Profit is the god. Law, as understood back east, meant court and procedure. Law on the frontier meant who drew faster. Places like Dodge City, Deadwood, Bannock, and Ellsworth were less towns than pressure cookers. Gold, whiskey, cards, women, and uncounted grudges swirling together. The Vigilantes of Montana puts it in the clearest possible terms. No condition could have been more favourable to lawlessness. Whiskey that could send a calm man into a killing frenzy, basically the original moonshine with a side of homicide, was sold in Tangle Leg and 40 Rod saloons. One shot of the 40 Rod special, and legend says you could taste the future. 40 rods away, flat on your back, staring at the ceiling, wondering why you ever left Ohio. Gambling houses opened onto the street like public theatres of chaos. In these places, calling a man a liar wasn't an insult, it was grounds for homicide. The Vigilantes text even states these rules. Calling a man a liar, a thief, or a son of a bitch is provocation sufficient to justify instant slaying. This was the lived normality of the frontier, and without any stable authority, violence became both communication and consequence. Howdy, stranger. Bang. Message received. That constant volatility created a psychology of respect and caution. Men chose their words carefully, treated others with deliberate respect, and understood that a single insult could end a life. Like knowing the guy pouring your coffee might also be measuring you for a pine box before breakfast. On the cattle trails and survey lines, Indian country is the tremor that wakes you up. One moment you are in the lazy rhythm of camp life, the next there is a sharp bang, 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 and a thunder of hooves. "Indians, they've shot the herders and stampeded the cattle," cried McCarthy. 4 a.m. cardio you didn't sign up for, barefoot in your long johns. By the time the soldiers get there, the brutal lesson has been written in the corpses. Soldiers from Fort Leavenworth found the herders, killed and mutilated in the Indian fashion, but the cattle had been stampeded among the buffalo, and it was impossible to recover a single head. On this frontier, stock, men, and miles of effort can be wiped out in an afternoon. Poof. Your entire 401k just turned into Buffalo Fart. The boy who will become Buffalo Bill learns to fight before he learns to shave. He's already built different. Gradually, I fell behind, and when night came, I was dragging one weary step after another. Dog-tired, but still clinging to my old Mississippi Jaeger rifle, a short muzzle loader which carried a ball and 2 buckshot. That old rifle is his whole future. When he sees the black figure of an Indian, he wore the war bonnet of the Sioux, and at his shoulder was a rifle, pointed at someone in the bottom below him. There is no time for speeches. I knew well enough that in another second he would drop one of my friends, so I raised my Yaga and fired. I saw the figure collapse and heard it come tumbling 30 feet down the bank, landing with a splash in the water. First kill, age 14. Congratulations, kid. Your childhood just got cancelled for extreme violence. McCarthy's reaction turns a kill into a rite of passage. McCarthy ran over to the brave. "Hi," he said. "Little Billy's killed an Indian all by himself." This is the kind of sentence that grows a legend. Older frontier engineers are colder about it. Ice cold, actually. One of them remembers an early blunder with hospitality. "It taught me a lesson, never to allow an Indian in my camp or around it without permission. And this was my instructions to all our engineering parties. Those who obeyed it generally got through without losing their stock or lives. Those who were careless and disobeyed generally lost their stock and some of their men. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, except the prize is a tomahawk haircut and your scalp becomes next season's fashion accessory. Behind the myth of the noble scout is that iron rule. Trust gets you killed, caution gets you through. And around them, the settlers feel the same thing, closing in. Standing as a mere handful of pickets out on the confines of civilization, where the war whoop of the painted savage rang through the forests, and the constant apprehension of the tomahawk and the scalping knife haunted every abode, and every thicket ambushed a bloodthirsty foe. Men hunted, fished, slept, toiled, and worshipped with their trusty rifles at hand. The women also were no less dexterous in the use of deadly weapons, and no less unerring in the precision of their aim. The frontier mind of the white man is created right there, half terror, half exhilaration, living with your finger never far from the trigger. And that, friends, is just a taste, one single, blood-soaked chapter of what ordinary white families on the frontier actually lived through to push the edge of America a few more miles west. Just raw will, loaded rifles, and the stubborn refusal to let the continent win. This is only part one. The real price paid to turn wilderness into a nation, paid in widows, orphans, scalps, and sleepless nights under a wagon sheet. Part two is coming soon. The story doesn't get prettier. It just gets more American.